Welcome to Peer Up today, and thanks for giving us your Sunday morning so that you can educate yourselves. So, here's a little bit of an intro about Peer Up for those who haven't been here before. Peer Up is a student led initiative connecting students with alumni and professionals for meaningful discussions that address real high school experiences and challenges. And some guidelines to ensure a smooth session. Please stay on mute and keep your video off to minimize distractions. Maintain respectful communication in the chat, but questions are encouraged in the chat box at any time, and we'll answer them towards the end of the session. And the session will be recorded and shared on YouTube if you want to review it. And today's speaker is Kushal Kedia, and he'll be giving us a real talk, on balancing GPA, passion projects, and hands-on experience, straight from an aerospace engineering journey. Thank you for listening, and then I'll pass it off to Rasika so she can ask the first question.
Yeah, before that, I was wondering if Kushal, you want to just give background about yourself and maybe speak for a few minutes before I start questions.
Yeah, sure. Hey everyone. As I said, my name is Kushal. I currently work as a vehicle structures engineer at a space startup in LA called Relativity Space. What that essentially means is, what our company does is we're a start to end service provider for launches for customers who want to launch like space stations, satellites, space capsules, anything that needs to go into orbit around Earth or go into space. Um, you can kind of think of it kind of like what SpaceX and Blue Origin does, or like what NASA kind of used to do back in its heyday. We design, build, and launch rockets. Current one we're working on is like a heavy lift rocket that can launch up to 20 tons into orbit. And my role there is a structures design for the vehicle or the rocket itself. So I work on a lot of design, analysis, and manufacturing work for actual parts of the rocket. And then to get to kind of like my background and how I got to this point. Growing up, loved a lot of like hands-on projects, engineering work, any chance I got to put my hands on like physical hardware, whether it be like taking apart toys to build things or like little kits I got as like, birthdays or holidays or whatever it would be, or like, finding whatever around the house to make other things out of it. Was a lot of taking motors from toys, using duct tape and various random things, to that I was sort of just interested in like putting things together. And then a lot of inspiration came from also like living in the Seattle area. My parents would take me to like the whenever we'd have people coming in from out of town, we'd go to the Boeing factory up in Everett for tours. And that's where like a lot of my initial love for aerospace kind of came from, and interest in planes. And then throughout elementary and middle school, that kind of like continued going on. Started experimenting with like other ways of building things. So got into like 3D printing quite a bit in high school. That's where I also started looking like more into computer softwares like CAD that I could use to design things. And then taking classes like more targeted towards what I wanted to do, and then also exploring like extracurriculars more related to that. So like space camp type things in the summer, robotics during the school year, and then like taking engineering classes where possible. Um, and then that's also when I also started trying to get my hands on in more real world things, whether it be engineering related or not. I spent a lot of time just trying to get like just doing things out in the real world, whether it be like volunteering, it'd be working places. I would do like volunteering at the library, a lot. would do like random odd jobs like ski instructing and tutoring for some amount of time. And then also other jobs like related to what I wanted to do. So like working at UW for a little bit, working on like robotics with them, where I also got to use more of my 3D printing and design skills and like develop those out. Um, and then after that, after high school, I went to college at the University of Colorado Boulder, where I majored in aerospace engineering. Um, and I think the main focus of my time while I was in college was a lot of time spent with the college rocketry team there. We're called the Sounding Rocket Lab. That's where I really picked up a lot of interests and skills in what I currently do, like in the rocketry arena, where started with a lot of like manufacturing, hands-on work, helping out like already established teams in building and testing solid rocket motors. And then that kind of led into leading some aspects of that team. So becoming the lead for the teams that do like our composites development, a lot of hands-on like composites manufacturing experience, and then design experience for our rockets, and eventually up to like leading that team in its entirety. That was kind of like the bulk of my college experience, I'd say, that like really led into what I do now. Gave me like the hands-on skills, leadership skills for it. Connected me with the right people to get into what I need to do now. Um, Through that, like got some internships in various places. So like went back to UW to do some drone related projects for them, and then an internship at my current company. Um, and then yeah, after college, moved out here to LA and have been in this role for about 2 years now. And yeah, it's about me and my career, how I got here.
Thank you so much for that background. Um, it's nice to hear how you've gone to this point. So now I would like to get into some of the questions that me and Ritesh had. So to start off, when you were in high school, what did you think an aerospace engineer's path looked like, and how different was that from reality?
Yeah, so I think what I thought it would have looked like was, I think, kind of what students typically think their career path would look like, which is you try to get highest GPA you can in high school, do your extracurriculars, whatever it is, go to the like best college that you can, do well in college, and then get internships and go to industry. Like pretty clear cut, just do like just perform as high as you can in every step, and then you'll land a job basically. And the better you do, the better job you get. What I actually ended up experience was like much more variable than that. Having to kind of seek my own opportunities to like get me to where I wanted to be, which was like a lot of the extracurriculars I was talking about. And then a lot of time outside the classroom too, that wasn't necessarily just, getting the piece of paper that has your degree on it. Um, Having to seek out your own projects, your own tasks, and then meeting people who could help you get to where you wanted to be. Um, and then I think, yeah.
Kushal, you mentioned in your background that from a young age you've always been interested in just getting your hands on things and just doing hands-on projects. And I was curious to know if there was a moment that pushed you into this route, and if so, what happened?
I would say I mean, as I said earlier, what like pushed me into the aerospace world in general was a lot of like getting exposure to like aerospace type things. So like Boeing factory and Museum of Flight in Seattle, which is where I kind of got interested in that world, and then specifically into rockets. I like attended a info session for the rocketry team freshman year in school, and that's kind of like the moment that tipped me off into getting actual hands-on work with rocketry specifically. As for just my general attitude towards like hands-on work, I think that's kind of just always been there for me. I think that will like depend more on the person, just based on like what they're interested in. Um, and then, but yeah, for like specific career interests, there was definitely whether it was going and like seeing planes and rockets or like going to that info session that I was kind of mentioning that one. Those were things that like really tipped me off into those.
Yeah, I think getting hands-on experience can shape a lot of students' paths. So the next question is more about like pressure. So a lot of students feel pressure and like the need to be perfect. Did you ever feel that, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah, so I think you get that, like every student will get that from some aspect, whether it be from their friends, from their parents, from their teachers. Then I, of course, felt that as well. It comes in the form of perfect, whether it be like getting high grades in your classes, going to like getting into the best colleges, getting the best internships or jobs. Um, I think part of how you deal with that is one, I think the main thing is kind of ignoring other people's pleas to be perfect and instead creating your own definition of what like perfect means to you. So for me, like I kind of ignored the aspect of perfect being, oh, getting a 4.0 GPA. For me, being perfect meant like going out and getting experience for the things that I actually wanted to do. It meant actually like building things, creating things, and then doing things that would lead to like a job where I was actually working and designing on rockets hands on rather than just like getting a 4.0 GPA. So I think you have to kind of be able to ignore the standard definition of what perfect might be or what other people's definition might be, and then create your own definition for what you want yourself to look like and how you want to get there, and then try to be perfect in that sense.
I love that response. A little bit of a follow-up question to that. Was there any way that you specifically decided how much energy to put into GPA versus getting real world experience? And like, how did you formulate your own definition of perfect?
Yeah, so I think like starting in early years of high school and college, it's good to start with focusing a lot on your classes and sort of exploring different extracurriculars, and that's kind of how you figure out what balance you want. um, you might find that you really like the class side of it more than you like the hands-on extracurriculars part of it, which might tell you that like that's kind of the area you want to go, that's the direction you want to go, is the more research and academia part of it. um, versus if you like really see that you like the projects and hands-on experience part of it, then that's how you decide like, okay, maybe this is what I should focus most of my time in. And for me, like I found myself being much more interested in the hands-on experience, the clubs and the extracurriculars, and that's just like what I enjoyed spending my time doing. So that's like kind of what I ended up doing. I knew that like I wasn't wasting my time or anything. I knew that I was still being productive and working on things that I wanted to. So like I didn't necessarily feel bad like, you know, ignoring or like putting less emphasis on other parts of my education.
Kind of more about this topic. For students that are worried that doing like extracurriculars and projects outside of school might hurt their grades, what would you tell them from your own experience?
Um, it Yeah, to be like perfectly honest, unfortunately, it does. I can tell you that from experience. I ended up treating a lot of my outside of class extracurriculars as like a full time job during school. to the point where I was doing them like 30, 40 hours a week. And then my schoolwork definitely suffered because of those to a degree. I think I went to probably an extreme with it that maybe I wouldn't necessarily recommend for everyone. But it like ended up paying off for me in the end because I think if I hadn't done those things, I wouldn't have the job that I have right now. I wouldn't have gotten the experience in designing and building rockets that I did in college, and I wouldn't have met the people that helped me like get this job. So, and I knew that what I was doing in college, what I was spending my time doing, is also what I wanted to do in my career, which is like what really made it worth it. So there's like some risk balance to that, definitely, where um, you want to make sure that you are like paying attention enough to, of course, like pass, but then also like learn the first principles that you need to. And then outside of that, like in my opinion, having that real world experience was definitely more beneficial to me than like increasing my GPA.
We've talked a lot about we've talked a lot about how hands-on experience and real-world experience has helped you. I wanted to shift the conversation a little bit to if there was anything in school that helped you, and specifically maybe like were there any classes that helped you and ended up being important in your engineering work?
hmm Yeah, there's classes that were like pretty heavily related to what I do, and that I also honestly wish I had paid more attention to back then. Like some of the classes, of course, you're always going to have classes that aren't super related to what you're trying to accomplish, but then all like there's always going to be some classes that you know they are you're going to need at least the first principles knowledge from them, which is where I feel sometimes I tend to lack a bit. So like we had structures classes and then like thermodynamics and aerodynamics classes that um, I use like a good chunk of elements from nowadays in school or nowadays in my career, and I tend to rely a lot on my like experience versus what was taught in those classes, but I certainly see elements of those classes like coming through in my work as well. And I think in addition to having like the real world experience, the first principles knowledge of your like of your industry or of your area that you're working in is like also equally just as important. And then there was also like projects classes, of course, that I enjoyed. Those were always fun. So like senior projects for a lot of students was like their first exposure to some of those real world projects. Um, and then additional like freshman projects and engineering classes. Those ones I enjoyed.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of classes, structures, thermodynamics, aerospace. Those are probably classes that you may see in college. Would you say that there are any classes in high school that were important for your engineering work?
Yeah, I think so. For me, at my high school, at least, we had like specific engineering classes. Um, so those ones, like obviously, we got like hands-on project experience. I think physics classes are like kind of the most relatable class that a lot of high school students will have the opportunity to get into and work on. And those like I feel like do a really good job of connecting what you're learning with like hands-on experiments that you do in those classes as well. And that's also like where I see a lot of people in my career. They also got their like inspiration for what they want to do from physics classes. So that would be like I think for most high school students the best way to kind of get into this arena. And then if you have access to like engineering specific classes or like manufacturing classes, machine shop classes, even like woodworking classes, those are ones where like there's a good connection between in classroom like theory learning and then like hands-on work.
Thank you. So, kind of more on skills instead of classes. If you had to pick one real life skill that you learned outside of the classroom that helped you most in your aerospace career, what would it be?
Um, I'd say one technical skill that I learned outside the classroom was CAD, which is computer aided design. Um, that's like in the industry, if you're working on any kind of physical product, how you'll actually go about designing it. I know at least for me in high school, CAD wasn't really taught. I don't know if that's like they're starting to integrate that more into classes now. Um, I definitely seen like that coming up more, and then like 3D printers also being integrated more into classrooms and libraries. So I think being able to like design things and manufacture things um, are like a couple really important things that weren't necessarily directly taught in school, but I kind of took charge to do myself that helped me like get to my specific job now.
Can you share a project that didn't go as planned? And if so, what happened to you and what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, so in college, we like I said, I did a lot of rocketry work there, and so we would build rocket engines, which would oftentimes explode when we were testing them. That was like never a fun time, and we'd have like experiences of we go back and rebuild and retest, and they keep exploding time and time again until third or fourth try. Um, I think what it taught me was that like there's no clear cut answer, especially in engineering, about how to solve a problem. It gave me more of a like what do you say, like more persevering attitude towards specific goals I want to get. In this case, like that goal was getting that specific rocket engine working. And then yeah, it taught me to basically how to engineer like problems better, how to go investigate them, think of different solutions, design and validate those solutions, and then like plan that stuff also around your resources, how much time and money you have and what the most efficient approach is based on those factors. Um, I think in high school had like similar experiences where it was, smaller scale, not as big as like a whole rocket engine, but just like small 3D printing projects that weren't working, um, investigating like what was causing prints to fail, and then how do you go and fix it, retrying that, and then figuring out what that solution was to making your prints like work more reliably in general in the future.
Kushal, you mentioned your experience in places like your college rocketry club and robotics and things like that. Was there any specific projects that you built or worked on that impacted you more heavily than the rest of them and made you think like I belong here and I belong in this aerospace journey?
Um, Let me think. Um, yeah, I might have to go back like again to those. I think probably the very first test that I did as part of the rocketry team. That like kind of cemented, this is what I want to do in college and then probably beyond. Um, I think as a freshman and like early on in whatever extracurriculars you're doing, you're kind of just like observing on the sidelines. You might not have the experience yet to like jump in yet and fully do a bunch of things, but you can still go and observe. And just me like watching them do these like engine static fires from the sideline, seeing how the teams operated, the kind of hardware they were building, and then like the excitement of the static fires itself. And then, of course, jumping in like in any opportunity you get. Um, I think that's like what kind of cemented it for me. After that, I was like, all right, I'm going to be at every static fire. I'm going to help out like every engine that I can and just like go to them to take on as many design tasks, etc. And then just in general, like keeping up with aerospace industry news also like was super exciting at the time. This is like around when SpaceX started landing their rockets and Blue Origin was like sending people up on their rockets into space. So like just seeing that in the news, even as like a high schooler, like got me like really excited for it.
Thank you. It sounds like a lot of kind of tying back to what you said before, it sounds like a lot of trial and error and like persistence is key in real engineering work. So more about like kind of making mistakes and learning from them. I'm curious, how do engineers deal with failure differently than how schools usually treat mistakes?
Okay, yeah. I think in school it's a very binary um, mistake, like or answer to mistakes. You know, you either got your math question right or you got it wrong, and this is the number you put down. This is the number it should be. Or like same with physics and like and most engineering things that I think are taught. It's a very like clear cut answer that they're trying to get you to. Whereas in reality, like it's never a yes or no answer. It's never like a, oh yeah, you missed this one negative sign on your equation and everything is wrong because of that. It's a like much more in-depth like iterative process to figure out what went wrong. There's like much more variables, um, and also much more ways to fix it. It's never going to be like a, if you get really lucky, it might be like a one really tiny thing that you did wrong, then now everything's fixed. But there's always going to be like a chain of things that led to whatever issues you're having, and a like there's going to be a chain of fixes that could be the fix, and then you have to go and try each of those fixes and also like validate those fixes are correct and reasonable.
Switching topics a little bit, kind of talking about your experience in clubs, you definitely mentioned how your rocketry club in college, that probably played the biggest role in getting you to where you are now. And the clubs in general are extremely supportive in helping your journey. How would you say that students that are interested in engineering could explore engineering even if their student doesn't offer robotics or aerospace clubs? And how can they navigate a little bit more of a difficult path?
Yeah. So even if you're not able to get directly into robotics or aerospace, you can like a lot of schools nowadays, they have like they might have maker spaces that have like 3D printers or like computers that have CAD software that you can experiment with. And even if like your schools doesn't, I know like a lot of libraries these days, in addition to, like having all the books and internet resources that they have, you can go into like libraries and ask them to 3D print things for you. And then if not, like, try to find friends or like public maker spaces that might offer those resources. Um, it doesn't even have to be like 3D printing things. It could be like wood shops, or like machine shops. Um, and then you can also like sort of delve into these interests, I think, just through like resources that everyone has available to them. So, it could just be like going through the internet for different topics that you're interested in. Um, there's like YouTube channels that like delve into a lot of engineering topics, which like, careful to not get in the rabbit hole of too, but like go and find specific channels. Like there's like Smarter Every Day and Veritasium that are like good channels that have like 10-15 minute videos on a whole swath of engineering related topics. And that's like a really good place to start and find a subject that you might be interested in and then delve into later down the line. So yeah, I think combination of like your school's resources, if they have public resources like libraries, which nowadays might seem like they're kind of useless. Why would anyone go to one of those? But they're also like adapting to like provide resources for what kids now are trying to do, and then internet resources like, YouTube, even just like Wikipedia, and just Googling things that you're interested in.
I think that's a great point. There's so many resources that everyone can access even without like having to go through formal clubs. So thinking more about high school students specifically, if you were one today interested in aerospace, what is one project you would start with this year?
Hmm. Um, I think I would pick something that you want to build or you think would be cool to build, and then just start building it. It could be a model rocket, it could be a model plane, um, anything like that. And then, based on what resources you have available to you, you can kind of choose how real you want that to be. It could be something as simple as like a model plane made of balsa wood and paper that you can like hot glue together and just use like scissors to put together, that you don't necessarily need a lot of resources for. Um, and then that's just like a good way to, it's not much, but it's something hands on that can kick you off, and you can see that, oh, this is something I enjoy doing, and maybe it's worth me looking more into how I can do more of this. Um, Model rockets are also like, actually, people think that might be like pretty tricky to get into, but you can get model rocket kits that you can launch to like a few hundred feet for like 10-15 bucks, and you can go and launch them at just like a park near you, which like a lot of people wouldn't necessarily know. And then you can like, the more time and resources you have, you can get a little fancier with it. You can start 3D printing some like little model plane things. You can start trying to put motors on it and make it like actually fly. um, but just pick some kind of project that you think would be cool to do, that you've been wanting to do, and then just start figuring out how to do it. It may seem like there's no way you could do this specific thing at first, but like, it there's definitely ways to do it, and I think that are simpler than you might think, especially when it comes to, how complicated people can think aerospace can be, whereas you can really make it like a lot simpler if you need to.
You've mentioned a lot about how you've taken kind of a different path compared to others, how you talked about your hands-on projects being valued more than your GPA. And I was wondering how this kind of definition of you are perfect influences how success means to you now, and how has this definition changed since high school?
um yeah, I think it definitely has. I'd say like those two kind of tie together, like what your definition of being perfect and your definition of succeeding are. um like for me, I would say I'm in a role that like is kind of very closely related to what I've been wanting to do most of my life, and like got there through doing activities that I also enjoyed. So like, I'm doing what I want to do in the role that I want to do. And then, so like, and I'm like happy with that job. So I think that like kind of fits my definition of success for myself. Um, I think how that's changed since high school. Um, I think it is, yeah, in high school, like, especially starting out in high school, I had that view that I kind of talked about earlier, where it's, I need to get the highest grades I can to go to the best school possible, um, to get like the best job. Whereas like how, that ended up working out was like, I got decent grades in high school. I ended up going to a college that like at first I wasn't too happy with, and was like definitely not near one of my top choices, but that's like kind of where I ended up. And then ended up like, maybe not getting great grades in college, but like led that's how I ended up getting on like a path that was successful for me and what ended up being like, my definition of success.
Thank you for that. I see a lot of questions in the chat. Just as a reminder, you can ask questions in the chat at any time, and that's the best way for everyone to get value from this session. So I'm just gonna ask some questions that have come up. So what kinds of hands-on activities did you do, and like what was your favorite and most helpful class outside of school too?
Okay. Let's see. Favorite hands-on activity. I'll start with one I did in high school. That was part of a class. So we I think this was like an engineering class in high school, and the challenge was like for us to in teams design a product of some kind that would help students with scheduling tasks and staying on track with their work and like keeping away distractions. And every other team in the class like decided that they wanted to make some sort of app for their phone that would like um, help students like organize their tasks and build a schedule. So like what I proposed to my team is, what if we instead build a time based locking box that you put your phone in to physically lock your phone away to like keep away distractions, which we knew was like some like weird crazy solution that wasn't necessarily super realistic, but it was different than what everyone else was doing and it was fun. And so like we got to use our school's like CAD software and 3D printers to like go and Arduinos and motors to go like build a box that had a timer on it that you could like put stuff in and then lock away and then unlock. And even if it wasn't necessarily super realistic, it was like something different than what everyone else had done, and we got to like do like hands-on work with it as part of our class. um, I think like in college, one of those projects was like the first rocket that I had built was um, probably like my favorite hands-on project, because I just got to do a lot of like hands-on carbon fiber work, mixing propellant, and then like driving out at like 5 a.m. to go launch it. Um, yeah.
We can ask one more chat question, and then we will go back to some of our prepared questions. And so one more chat question is just, were there any other clubs that you haven't already mentioned in the session that helped you?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like TSA, FBLA, HOSA type clubs, which are kind of like competition clubs for students to go and participate in like competitions related to their fields of interest. So like I did TSA in high school, which was like more tech related, and there was engineering challenges, things like that that like let you design and build things. And then for every student, based on what they're interested in, there's different clubs, competitions like that. So like for healthcare, people interested in healthcare, there's HOSA that has a lot of competitions and activities related to that. And then same for like if you're more into business and economics, then like FBLA is a good field for that. um but I think those are like pretty good like activities clubs that can directly challenge students in fields that they're specifically interested in.
Thank you for that response. Now we're gonna kind of come back to our prepared questions. The next few questions are more about like mindset and choosing your own path. Obviously, aerospace is a very unique path. So when you were in high school and school, did you ever feel like you were taking a different path than your peers, and how did you stay confident in choosing your path?
Yeah, I a lot of my peers definitely like it seemed like everyone was going down either like a computer science path or like some sort of like medical path. There were some that were interested in like the mechanical field that are more what I was doing, but it definitely felt like I was taking a different approach. And I definitely got like weird looks from other students. Um, but like I knew that that was what I was interested in. And I kind of been adamant for a while that like I'm not interested in like the whole CS kind of fad that was largely going around, especially at my school. So I think knowing what I wanted to do and just kind of like knowing that like people will try to tell you like, oh, I would like that's like why would you want that as a career? Like why are you interested in this? If you know that like it's a valid career and you know that it's something you want to do, then like just keep chasing that down, which like ended up working because afterwards, like I would be the one that a lot of other students would come to when they needed help with that sort of thing. Like if students needed help designing and 3D printing things, I was like one of the select few in the school that had experience with that. So then they would come to me like for help with that. And that definitely like validated a lot of like the path I was taking.
Thanks for sharing that. One of the last questions that I personally have in mind is if a student feels lost right now, what's one small step they can take to start finding their direction?
Hmm. Um, it's a good one. I would say going around to different extracurriculars or clubs, maybe especially like the beginning of school years where they have like club fairs. You can go and see what all the different extracurricular options are, and then seeing like, oh, this is something that I could be interested in. And then, you don't have to commit to anything, but that's a good spot to like see what kind of things there are in the world. And then you can go to the first few meetings of like any club. You can pick 10 things that you'd be like, this sounds cool, and then kind of narrow it down from there. And then exploring like I said earlier, some of the other resources around you, like using YouTube to go and like watch a 10-minute video on like 20 different topics. And then from there, be like, oh, these couple things sounded interesting. I'm going to go explore these topics more in depth. Maybe even talking to like teachers of classes that you really like. If there's a couple classes that you really specifically enjoy, then you like go to the teachers and say, hey, I'm interested in like this thing that you were talking about. Can you tell me more about it, or can you find, or are there some specific things that like you think I should go look at more?
Thank you so much. Now we're kind of gonna move back to the chat questions. So Dia asked, I know you already mentioned a lot about the specific clubs that you did, but are there any specific robotics competitions that you recommend? FTC or VEX? Um, if you have any experience, which is better.
I did, I think, FTC for a couple years. I honestly don't have much input on which one is like better or worse. I know in my school there's a lot of students who did VEX. I think either one will be beneficial. I think what matters more is the kind of role that you can get within those teams. Um, so, like, if you want to do hands on and building, if you can find a team that has an opportunity for you to do that, then being able to like exercise those opportunities and what you make like of that opportunity would probably be more meaningful than like the end result itself. Um, but I don't have like really enough experience with those like the different competitions to know exactly which one's like necessarily better or worse.
Thanks for that question and that response. Our next question from a listener is, what would you tell your high school self that could help students like me?
Um, I would say don't don't worry about the path you think you should be taking or the path that like other people are saying that you should take. You be comfortable and open with changing your path, taking your own path, and like defining what you want to do. I think a lot of students get stressed about what they should be doing and like what grades they should be getting, what colleges they should be going to. Um, and I think if you're spending all your time worrying about that, you might lose sight of like your actual interests, and you might you might go down a path that doesn't necessarily actually help you out. So like I would tell my old high school self to like continue carving your own path, and that like whatever it is will work out in the end. Like you're not going to end up, you're not going to end up completely lost. You'll, regardless of like how it goes, you'll find something or the other to like keep you going. And there's not one like set way to get there.
Thank you. The next question is AI support used to help with your work to build rockets in your company?
It can be. I don't personally really use any. Um, the extent that it does get used to is kind of like quick chat GPT questions of like, oh, what is a method to do this type of analysis, or what is this equation, or you know, like draw up sketches for how to do this. It's I'd say there's definitely fewer people who use it than don't use it. Um, it's kind of like just a bit of an aid tool to like help ideas and like brainstorming maybe go a little faster, but it's not necessarily like it's not super extensively used.
Thank you for that insight. Our next listener question is, can you share your experience or an activity that ended up being more important or interesting than you originally expected, and something that you use even today?
Let's see. What is um it's a good one. I think there was a I think like test stands that we built in college are typically like test stands are what you would use to test rocket engines. You like mount motors and engines on them and then ignite them, and they're what collect your data and like actually like carry all the loads of your rocket. They're things that sound very simple. It's just like it should just be a big block of metal that you mount an engine to. Um, there's like a lot more that goes into it, and also a lot more skills that you can learn from it. So like you learn, not only did like I learned some design skill from that, but like there was more like structural analysis that went into it. I learned like some amount of welding through there since it was like a welded steel structure, and then also learned some amount of like electronics and a little bit of like coding experience from that, because you need to write systems that will collect all your data and then do like all the wiring and all the sensors for that. um, and then I still like really wish I could do some of that super multidisciplinary stuff where I was like doing some amount of welding, some amount of electronics and wiring and coding, a whole bunch of like, different skill sets for one project.
Thank you for your response. The next question is more about your path. What would you suggest for students who haven't made up their mind yet on what to focus on and confused with various options to choose from?
Um, I think going and go and try a little bit of each of the things. You can just go and sit in on an info session for like the thing that it is. You know, if what you're interested in is like a club that has info sessions, then just go to like, you know, you might have to go to multiple 30-minute sessions at least. In college, that's typically how it works is there's like each of these clubs at the beginning of each semester will have a 30-minute like meet and greet type thing. And that's a good way to figure out if like it's something that you would be interested in, and if not, then just go and do it for a little bit. You might waste a couple hours and realize that you don't like it, but that's also like I don't necessarily think of that as time wasted because that's also like you're figuring out what you don't like, which I think is like equally as important. So just go and try and do it, and like you'll figure out if it's right for you. If it's like you really enjoy it, then you'll keep doing it. And then if you didn't enjoy it, then just don't go back to it. And like, there's no harm in that.
Our next question from the chat we have for you is, what do you think the impact of SpaceX IPO will be on the rocket industry? And I hear they're IPOing this year. If you had a chance, would you join them?
Um, I think, well, so they're going to be like the first of the private space industry companies to IPO. I think it's pretty much confirmed at this point, even like publicly. But I think it definitely sets a good precedent for the rest of the space industry, showing that like it's no longer, you know, back in the 60s, 70s, up until now, it's been like largely government agencies that control everything having to do with space. But as companies like Blue Origin and SpaceX have cropped up over the last like 20 years, they've been validating the whole like commercial private space industry is like, you know, a valid industry. But I think that will kind of set the precedent for a lot of companies to follow that, you know, you can build a private space company and like can be massively successful, and it's not like necessarily just up to the government to like do rocket related things. um would I join them? I think I mean, I don't know, we'll have to see about that in the future. I think with the current company I'm at and like decently happy with it. I will say that's like the SpaceX itch is a lot of thing that a lot of like new aerospace engineers get. And so like they of course work on like cool stuff, and potentially like in the future I would consider it.
The next question is, what are some where does how to start internships in high school and where could you look for these positions?
Yeah, so I think in high school, look for, I think in general with internships, especially early on, a lot of mistakes students make is looking for roles at like really big well established companies. um, And like my freshman year of college, I think I applied to like 200 internships, and I like heard back from like one of them, and I was applying to all these big like companies, you know, the big aerospace players. But and like a lot of students in high school will do that, but the way a lot of these work is like, you know, one, you're going to be lucky if your resume gets looked at, and then there's so many more experienced people applying, especially to these big places, that chances of succeeding there are probably not great. So instead, like earlier in your career, look for smaller companies and smaller opportunities. Um, it doesn't even have to be like an actual company. It can be, you can email professors at colleges near you. You can talk to your teachers to see if they're doing some research. You can go find some like local companies, some like small startups, and ask them if they need help. um, and then like just cold messaging LinkedIn, uh, people on LinkedIn is also like a good method. It can be like kind of disheartening and annoying, but just like reaching out to people who work in the industry that you're interested in and just saying, hey, like, you know, I'm interested in like the kind of work that you do. Like, are there opportunities for me to help out? Um, I think that's a yeah, any sort of like if it's just doing research, if it's helping out, it could be like shadowing engineers. Um, and then yeah, like looking for smaller companies and opportunities.
The next question I have to ask you is, what individual competitions did you participate in, and what awards did you put on your college application resume?
Um, I participated in what was it? I did 2 years or like 1 year of TSA, I believe. I think that, and then 2 years of FTC. I think I don't know if I ended up putting any. I think we won some stuff in TSA, um, but I don't think there was anything from that that like I ended up putting on my college apps. I think I definitely like put down participation in those things, and then like I think if we whatever level we won, I think like maybe we placed in like state levels one of the years. So I included those, but I wasn't too into like a lot of the competition teams that like happened in high school.
Mhm.
The next
Uh,
question is, can you call out a couple of skills that I should focus on? Maybe skills that are typically overlooked by high school students.
Um, let's see. I think it highly depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to go into like a mechanical design and engineering type role, then like CAD and 3D printing, or not even 3D printing, just CAD and manufacturing are like two very overlooked things that you don't necessarily get a lot of opportunity to do. And then let's see. Yeah, I mean, for other industries, I wouldn't happen to know too well. If you're interested in like software, then you know, like I think coding is pretty well covered in a lot of high school classes these days. But like, yeah, I think it depends largely on like what kind of career you're specifically trying to get into. But yeah, for like mechanical stuff, it's those kind of couple things I said, like design and manufacturing skills that you'll largely have to kind of seek out yourself.
I think we talked a lot about clubs and activities. So kind of more on a personal note, what are your next steps and what is in your career? What is your greatest success and maybe worst failure?
Ooh, so next steps, I think I want to stay in the rocketry game for a little bit, probably a couple more years. Um, there's other elements of aerospace too that are interesting. Like it's not necessarily just launching things, but then there's also like the satellites and the space capsules and the space stations themselves. So there's like a lot of work going in now to like human space travel and like taking that further and further. So that could be cool to work on. And then outside of aerospace, I'm like interested in just like transportation things in general. So like things that move. So like working on electric cars maybe could be fun for some time. Um, High speed trains are like I think pretty cool thing, and if those start gaining more traction in the US, then that could be something fun to work on. Um, so yeah, probably stay in the aerospace game for some amount of time, and then beyond that, not too sure. It's a couple different interest fields within like transportation, clean energy could be like cool to work in. And then yeah, there were some other elements to that question, right?
Yeah, it was what was your biggest failure and success?
Hmm. Biggest success. I think biggest success is like seeing your parts that you've designed go through like the full cycle of design, analysis, release, and like manufacturing. And then the actual, like, I think turning point of that, when I think I can call it a success, is like you get to see the parts that you designed be installed like onto the rocket, and then like you get to basically see your hardware fly to space. So I think that's always really cool to see. Biggest failure, I think in college there was one motor, there was one engine that I was working on that like kept failing, and we weren't able to fix that before I graduated. And like the students who came after me into the rocketry team ended up figuring it out, and like had to go through multiple cycles. But that was one that I definitely wished that I could have like figured out while I was there, and was kind of disappointed that I had to like graduate without having like fixed that issue. So that was certainly kind of disappointing. But then after that, you get to go to industry, and then you get to see your parts like get built and get installed and fly to space, which is pretty sick.
I think this next chat question is a little bit of a follow-up from a previous listener question, where you talked about how in your aerospace field, scientists generally don't really use AI that much. They may use it as kind of like a supporting tool for some things, some brainstorming ideas.
Mm-hmm.
This question is, what kinds of AIs just have you used?
Um, I don't have a ton of personal experience with it. I know some people will just use Chat GPT. Um, it's kind of tricky because you can't feed it any of these AIs any like technical info about what you're working on, since there's like IP and security stuff related to it. So you can kind of only ask pretty generic questions. So yeah, I know some people would like do a little bit of guiding through Chat GPT. For me, the extent of it is typically just like using like the AI summaries that Google will list of things, or like searching. I think I've used Chat GPT like a couple times to search for like parts and part numbers and things like that.
I think we had one last question. I think you already mentioned a couple skills, but could you call out skills that I should focus on, typically being overlooked by high school students?
Yeah, I think we already covered that one. But yeah, I think like I said, very dependent on what career you're interested in. Um, I think in general, like one skill that I like still not very great with, that I think everyone will like need in their career, is just like general communication skills. Um, like especially like multimodal like communication. So like I'm like love talking to people in person and work, and like having a lot of like in-person meetings and conversations. But I'm like not as great with like Slack and email. um and so like being able to be fluent with multiple modes of communication, I think, is important. And then like the somewhat cheesy like organizational skills is definitely like, I think, fairly important. I'd say one thing that I probably wish I'd started doing earlier was just like jotting down notes on like what I need to do, or like what I need to accomplish for the day. I don't necessarily mean note taking as like, taking notes on lectures and things like that. I mean just like jotting down quick to-do lists of like tasks or things that you have to like reminders of things that you need to do. Whenever I do remember to do that, it's certainly helpful. And then, yeah, for my industry, technical skills that I think don't get covered in high school, or like design and manufacturing. So getting a head start with like using CAD softwares, and then learning how to manufacture things, whether it be like, in high school, that's probably like 3D printing things is like the easiest way to do that, or like even building things with like wood and cardboard. And then if you want to get more advanced with it, going to like machine shops and making things out of metal.
We are a few minutes over time, so I think we can wrap up the session here. Before that, I just wanted to say thank you so much for everybody joining and being engaged in the chat and Q&A sessions. And thank you, Kushal, for being a great host. And then I'll pass it off to Jessica for the outro.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kushal, for sharing your story and experiences with us today. So I had a few key takeaways from your talk. One being that grades matter, but having like skills and extracurriculars open a bunch of more doors. Hands-on projects and having like problem-solving skills and real experience can set you apart from other people. And you don't need a perfect path, and that there's no like single route into aerospace or engineering. So just like exploring and adjusting and learning can help you grow for a better future. Another point that I got was that it's okay to start small, but um, you just need to be more consistent. Even if like if they're small self-driven projects, it can be done over time and turn into real skills that matter more um, in your future. Um, I think you also mentioned failure and that it's going to be part of the process. Um, and that like engineering teaches you that mistakes can be turned into lessons and like persistence is also key to success. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here and for encouraging everyone to um, kind of get into their own unique path. So I think that brings our session to a close. Thank you everyone for joining the meeting, and we truly hope you leave today feeling inspired with new skills. Um, for the audience, we want to know what you'd like to learn next. So if you could please send us your suggestions for future session topics that you would like to learn about. And for more details on upcoming talks and recordings and more, you can visit our website at peer-up.org. And if you enjoyed today, please share Peer Up with your friends and family to grow our community. Um, we have a lot of amazing content on our website. So if anyone has any follow-up questions for the team, please reach out on our website. And thank you, Kushal, for making this a great session.
Thanks, guys. It's great talking with you all.
Thank you.